All right, today I'm going to be talking about the topic of why you should always be buying things only if you personally enjoy it, as opposed to buying things when it comes to collectible card games like Weiss Schwarz, buying them purely based on the fact that you think it might be a good investment. And I know there's always outliers, right? So let's say the Kaiba 2002 tin, for example, if you bought these back then for like $15, $20 and now like 20, 30 years later, they're worth like $1,300. Okay, great. You won the lottery and you made a great pick on somehow finding the one thing that, people didn't expect to go up in value, but it did go up in value. But remember, for every person that wins the lottery, there's millions and millions of other people that lose and don't win anything. And I make these videos because realistically, if you can afford it and if you have the money, the cash to spend, and you can blow it on whatever you want, and you're financially established, that's perfectly fine and all, right? Those people could buy all these cards for thousands of dollars, and if the next day, you know what, it's completely worthless and the value just tanks to zero, then it doesn't matter to them, right? Because they have that money to spend. And I make these videos because, especially when I was working in banking, I realized a lot of people are not financially established, and it's very, very easy to get roped in by people when it comes to hype or what's considered the next big thing. Like, I always hear people like, oh, I don't trust in the traditional systems, and then they get roped into these weird things like pyramid schemes, and all of these try to target people because they know, like, okay, you're struggling from things like, oh, you have student loan, you have some sort of debt, you're making monthly payments on this, monthly payments on that, and then suddenly someone comes on and say, oh, if I'm able to sell this, then you could do it as well too for like 10 times the value. And it's really, really easy to fall into that trap when you could be spending your money elsewhere, and you could be talking to like an actual financial advisor who could tell you that you might want to budget, you might want to start setting money aside first, and then everything else, that's when you could spend it on like your hobbies and what you enjoy, so that way you could take a break from all like the stress of, real life things. And I get it though, right? There's always strong reactions when it comes to things that we don't like to hear, or things that are differing and opposing to our personal opinions. And I always like using analogies. So, for example, like if I bought this pair for like $20,000, and then one of you guys came along and told me, you know what, this pair is worthless. Who would pay $20,000 for it? It's like probably gonna be worth like $10 or something, right? I'm gonna be upset about it because as a person that bought it for $20,000, I'll be like, oh, I already spent this much money on it. If someone told me it's worthless, that means that I just got ripped off, and I don't want to admit that I got ripped off. So I'd rather double down on it. Like, you know what? You're wrong. You're an asshole, and this is actually worth like a bazillion dollars and gonna be like priceless later on. And before you call me an idiot, no, I didn't spend $20,000 on this. And the first main thing I want to point out is, and this kind of supersedes everything else, right? The most important thing is that you have to remember you want to buy things that you enjoy, because I'm sure we've all encountered it where you're into one hobby and then you're into the next. You might enjoy one thing at one time of your life, and at other points of your life, you're like, I don't really care about this anymore. And at some point, you're going to be like, I don't want to play with these things anymore, right? And that could apply to these hobbies like card games and collectibles, where you might be into it at one point and you think, oh, I'm going to stick with this forever. But you know what? Maybe next year you'll go like, you know what? I don't care about this anymore. And then whatever you bought for like $600, $700, you're going to end up selling for $200, $300 because you just want to get rid of it. And the important part about this too, as well, is this will kind of apply to the other things I talk about. But the same as how you move from one hobby to the next and you care about this one thing now, and later on in your life you might not care about it, this applies to other people as well too, where right now everyone might be like, oh, I really like ReZero, or I really like Attack on Titans, like this anime, or whatever is like in at the moment. Like I like Spider-Man. But then 5, 6 years later, or even like faster than that, maybe like 6 months later, no one cares about it anymore. No one wants to talk about it anymore. Then, where does that leave you? So keep that in mind as we move along, so that you'll get a better understanding of it once we put all these concepts together. And there's two main concepts that I want to talk about to explain everything. And the first one is going to be about our personal worldviews. Like, for example, maybe if I had traumatic childhood experiences, that might have led me to be the way that I am and why I view the world the way that I do. Hmm. Jokes aside, though, this ties back to the previous idea where I talked about why we get upset when people tell us certain things that we have are not valued as much to other people because we see things a certain way. And this could apply to all other aspects of your life too, right? You always have to remember that your view of the world is shaped by your personal experiences and whatever your surrounding is, right? So if I live in a big city, I'm going to view the world a certain way, and if someone lives in a more like small town, they're going to see the world in a different way as well too. It's all based on what we experience and our personal environment that surrounds us. And another example that I'll give is how we might view indigenous people. So indigenous people might be people that live in the Amazons, or they might be hunter gatherers that hunt for food even in modern day. Whereas to us, people who live in, societies that are in cities or with like houses, electricity and all this stuff, we see it as weird. We see them, they dress differently, they eat things that you might be considering like exotic and kind of weird that you would never eat. And to us, it's might be considered, uncivilized. But to them, their worldview, they see everything as normal, and maybe we're the ones that are weird. So at this point, if I haven't lost you yet, you're probably thinking, what the hell is wrong with this guy? What the hell is he even talking about? So with our personal worldview that you might consider somewhat skewed most of the time, then we tend to associate ourselves with other like-minded people. I mean, if you even think about it, when you look at your friends probably share the same type of views of the world that you do. Whereas, people that don't share the same views of the world, you don't want to associate with them because, they're just different from you, right? So that kind of applies to card games as well, too, where if you're buying certain cards like Albedo for like $5,000, then you're going to see the world in a certain way, and you're going to tend to listen to the opinion of people that also egg you on, like, oh, you know what? Yeah, you're right. This is going to be worth like a bajillion Basil bucks later on. So when you think about this, it's important to understand that when it comes to hype and how people constantly try to drive other people to be interested in a certain thing, you might not personally have been that into it to begin with, but because these people are trying to drive up interest on it, you think to yourself like, oh, maybe they're right. And then you get stuck in that mindset because you're just surrounding yourself with people like that. But in reality, because you're not listening to differing opinions, you know, maybe being that guy that bought one of these two cards for $5,000 might not have been that great of an idea when later on you might not have been that interested in the first place. And when you try to dump these cards, no one else wants to buy it at these prices. And the second concept that I want to talk about, which is pretty similar, and it's going to be personal biases and how we remember things and nostalgia. And this one's a really big one because when you look at like the most expensive Weiss Schwarz cards or any other card game you might want to look at, and I'm going to use Weiss Schwarz as an example, where you have like the Mushoku Tensei SPTD that's going for like 2,000 now. I don't know anyone that actually bought it, but all these like cards that people make a grail, and then they try to argue that, oh, the Bunny Girl Mai is gonna be iconic, the Albedo is gonna be iconic, Re Zero with Amelia and Rem is like super iconic. But think about it though. It might be iconic now for whatever reason, maybe because people are hyping it up, but even if there's like a natural like demand for it, right? How long are these animes going to be relevant for? Are they going to be relevant forever? And we could do all sorts of mental gymnastics to defend our favorite animes. Like, oh, I like this certain anime, so anyone who thinks otherwise is an idiot because they don't know how much of a masterpiece it is, right? But when you're buying these cards, you have to think about how everyone's trying to hype up these cards because, oh, it's only going to go up, up, up in value. But when you truly think about it, do you really think that later on in like 10, 20, 30 years or whatever it is that you're planning to hold these cards onto for, is someone going to really care about Re-Zero 20, 30 years down the line and think that it's a masterpiece like you do and going to understand why you paid, I don't know, like thousands of dollars for a card of Rem in a swimsuit, and then you're gonna be thinking, oh man, I'm not going to be able to sell this for however much people said it was. But at that point, however many years have already passed, and it's already too late. It's not like whoever's hyping them up right now and sold it to you is going to be like, oh, let me give you the money back because I was wrong. And I'll pull up a random, I guess, like top anime lists from like the 90s, for example, just to show how fickle it is when it comes to animes and how short people's memories are. So the top animes they have is things like Sailor Moon, Hunter x Hunter, Detective Conan, Pokemon, Dragon Ball, Evangelion, Yu Yu Hakusho, Kenshin, all these other animes, right? And then you have to remember you might think very, very fondly of these animes, and you personally might find them like, oh, okay, these are like the best of all time. But for every generation that comes out afterwards, they might not care about these things as much. So, maybe the new kids, they really love Peppa Pig and they really love SpongeBob. And when you ask them, like, oh, do you know Slam Dunk? Have you watched the original Cowboy Bebop? Have you watched Kenshin, Yu Yu Hakusho? Evangelion, and all these things that we thought that would be timeless and forever, some of them, are still relevant, like Pokemon or Dragon Ball and stuff like that. But for every one anime that lasts, that are become timeless for because of certain reasons and reruns, everything else they get forgotten. So before you buy these cards thinking that it's gonna be stonks forever and it'll only go up, remember that when it comes to animes, especially in Weiss Schwarz, you have to think about are people gonna care about Sword Art Online and Asuna like 20 years down the line? Is anyone gonna care about Data Live and Kurumis or like Rent a Girlfriend? Like you might like it now and you personally feel like, oh man, this is a classic. It's always gonna be remembered because of the story or whatever it is, the character design. But will other people feel the same way? If you personally enjoy this item and you enjoy the characters and the card and you bought it purely just for yourself, then great. You don't have anything to worry about, right? But if you fell into the hype and you got roped into thinking that these things are going to be forever going up because it's like rare and limited, think about it. When you put that into perspective, are people really going to care about Rem in a swimsuit, Asuna, or like an obscure anime like Overlord, like the Albedo cards? If you didn't personally care about these characters and these cards, will it really be relevant later down the line? And if the 90s is a little bit too far back, and I mean, you just have to remember there's all these other fads that, if you think about it, they all disappear. Like, certain type of jeans, certain type of clothing, certain type of trends. Like, trends change all the time. What we see as iconic now might not be as iconic. Whatever singers you like might not be the same type of music and singers that other people like. And then if we even look at, 2000s animes like Inuyasha, Naruto, Bleach, and all these, like, Code Geass and all these other animes, right? You might personally like it, but as for, like, different generations later on, they might not find the same stock and the same things that you do, and it might not be as popular to them, and maybe they haven't even ever heard of it before either. So when you tie everything together, when I talk about nostalgia, your personal biases, how your personal views are shared by people that you surround yourself with and you interact with, and we tend not to want to listen to people with differing opinions, you have to remember every time someone tries to hype you up that these cards are going to be, the stonks cards and these are the holy grails and, it can only go up because of the rarity, the limited print runs, and all this stuff. Remember, for every anime that becomes timeless, there's like a bajillion other ones that are just completely forgotten about that you might personally care about, and we might consider them somewhat timeless, but in the scope of things, no one's willing to pay that much money for it. Like, if you buy this Albedo card for like a new anime like Overlord, or you really care about ReZero and you think that, a swimsuit Rem card and Amelia card is going to be timeless and people will always demand it, think really hard about it before you get roped into spending money on something that you might not have cared about that much before people try to drum up interest and hype it up. And to further reinforce that, you could Google and just look up most forgotten animes in the past 20 years. And you look at all these lists of all these like forgotten animes from like the 90s, the 2000s, and whatnot. And then you'll realize like a lot of these things you probably never even heard of or never even thought about at all, like Chobits or something like that. I remember it, but do other people really remember some of these animes? Like a random Pinterest about like these like top 15 animes, like all these like schoolgirl animes and stuff like that. You personally might care about it and it might be nostalgic to you, right? But when we're talking about people spending like thousands and thousands of dollars on these Weiss Schwarz cards, and you're led to believe that these cards are gonna always go up in value and they'll, you know, never be forgotten. I'm personally a little skeptical, especially with cards like, oh, because of all these waifu cards, like, swimsuit rem cards. Be very careful. And I'm gonna use one more example, and it's the Pokemon market, where for a while these investors try to make a trend of a thing of full art trainers, and they were trying to make waifu trainer cards a thing, and they're gonna say, oh, these are gonna be stonks and they're gonna go up forever. For the most part, these card prices failed. They try to buy up all the female trainer cards and try to jack up the prices, and at this point, no one is really buying them anymore, and they're just going down, 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 and down. I mean, there's certain cards like this Lily card, and they try to retain that value there because there's still people that are trying to make this a thing. But you have to realize these investors and hype people are just trying to make money. And, these are just pump and dumps, right? So they pump these prices up, and people think, oh man, maybe this is really a thing. People keep talking about it. And it was like a trend in Pokemon for a while. And I saw all these people buying binders of, I'm going to collect all the full art trainers, and this is going to be stonks. Like cards like this Marnie card that was, that was at some point, let's see, it was like $70, and now it's dropped down to like $20 near mint. And the examples go on and on, right? But these same type of investors have moved into Weiss Schwarz, and they're trying to do the exact same thing. And they failed in Pokemon, and they're trying to move into Weiss Schwarz because the market is, the people pay a lot more money because it typically tends to be adults that are collecting this. And that's why you have to be very, very, very careful. So at the end of the day, if you bought these full art trainer cards in Pokemon and you didn't personally enjoy these cards, like the Marnie card, for example, and you bought it for like $70, $80 and now it's only $20, then, you lost out. You lost half your money. And we could use that example for like the Albedo card. If you bought it for like $4,000 or $5,000 and no one's willing to buy it for that price and the demand really wasn't there once these investors move on, then it drops to like half or more, right? Then you lost out. And is anyone going to feel bad for you? No. So at the end of the day, if I help even one person out there to save their money and not fall into hype, then I feel like I did a good thing. But just remember, at the end of the day, these people are just in it for the money. And whenever there's hype surrounding something, you should always, always just be careful and think twice before you make these purchasing decisions. But that's it for the video. I hope you found it informative and you enjoyed watching it. And just remember, at the end of the day, trends change all the time. And as long as you buy things that you enjoy personally, then you won't ever regret it. But if you end up falling into hype and paying these ridiculous amounts of money for things just purely based on the fact that other people are making it out to be like the chase thing to go after, then a lot of times you might actually end up regretting it. So just be careful out there, okay? Have a great day.